On Sunday,
And can I just make a comment? Just this would help everybody, right? I think we need permission from everybody. Why don't we call this the Anne class? Right? Good. Everyone's voted yes. Right, Anne, tell us your news now, right? And we get it over and done with. We're fine. We're done. We're supposed to be doing prehistoric Scatness today, but we need to listen to your news.
well, on Sunday on Alan Titchmarsh, I don't know what it's called now, but
Oh gosh.
he does have
Yeah, it's
guests,
a program with Alan Titchmarsh. That's fine.
and he's got guests, and one of them was a
I
news
wonder.
reporter that we used to love.
What? What?
She was
Hugh Edwards.
Sabrina or something, but anyway, she's on a farm now, and she goes digging, and she finds she had an artifact. It was a chisel, yeah, Neolithic.
Hmm.
And Alan Titchmarsh wasn't impressed at
No,
all.
no, because
But
he's a
I thought, oh, right, yeah, good.
because
Yeah,
he's
because
a
she
real
had
guy.
like it was it was a cutting tool,
Hmm.
and it was really good artifact. So that was archaeological.
Yeah, which part of the country was this? Was it Scotland, Wales? You know.
Oh no, I think she's in Yorkshire.
Yeah, well, it does help.
Oh, and they went to Iona on one of the other programs.
That's good. That's good.
They're going up Scotland all the time now on
Yeah,
these
got
holy programs.
Goff's going to the pub tomorrow.
I am.
Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Richard, I want you to tell us your news before I let the cat out. Go on, man, out. Richard, give us your news. Richard.
Richard, he's Richard. You're not.
All
Oh,
right.
have you got any news, Richard?
No, nothing at all for me.
Didn't you see
That's-
that program? Ode to Joy does. I think it's on ITV.
Look, I've
No.
had enough of hearing about Alan bloody Tish Marsh. Right, let's crack on. Goff,
No,
anything you want to tell us?
no news. No news. Sorry.
Good. Goff, you should have signed in about 5 minutes earlier. It was even more entertaining than this. Right, Henry,
Good evening.
Good
look,
evening.
I don't give a stuff about Ireland tonight. We're not doing that bloody silly island. But if you want to tell us something about Ireland now to start off with, it's fine.
No, I was going to do archaeologists on a secret tomb in ancient city of Petra.
Oh,
Well,
we need it. Because hang on, stop a minute. The context of this, right, is that very few tombs in Petra that have been excavated have ever revealed a single anything. We found nothing in most of these things, and they found a tomb in Petra. There's something in it. I want to know more.
there's at least 12 skeletons and there's some artifacts. And one of them strangely looks like a goblet, possibly the Holy Grail.
Oh, you're having a bloody laugh.
Ooh.
No,
Because actually, me and Goff can tell you because we saw this in the cinema. That is where the Last Crusade was filmed, right? And if that is where that is the goblet from the film The Last Crusade. Go a bit
Oh,
further into the screen. Go on.
oh, oh, yeah, the Holy
Oh my
Grail.
God, that looks like the one in the film.
Oh,
2,000
but
years
it's not
old.
the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail was. Oh, anyway, no.
And Shaq. But how old is it?
2,000 years at least, which is
Yeah, but
oddly occurring with something else.
yeah, go on, tell us.
Oh, no, I'll leave it to your imagination.
What, the birth of Jesus Christ?
Your next starring role.
Yeah, look. Oh, my God, I've had such an interesting week, and I've been told if I tell anyone about it, right, that's my acting career over and done with. But it was absolutely bloody brilliant acting last week. It was so brilliant, right? I can't say anything more.
No, it must be very
I
frustrating.
tell you what, I can say one thing. I was so good in this film, right, that they asked me to come in on Friday.
To reshoot.
Ooh. Well, is that because you're a good?
That I tell you what, that's really hurtful what you just said there, Henry. Take it back. It really is. You bloody.
No, the Holy Grail was the cup that
We know.
was it the cup at the Last Supper, or where they put the
The cup.
blood of Jesus?
No, the cup
Yeah,
of the
that's the
Last
one.
Supper.
Yeah, Barabbas. That's the one. Right. Okay. Right. Finally, because I want to crack on. Right. Because I have lost the will to live, and Henry has just Goff. He don't know why he does these anymore. Right. Anyway. Who else is there? Pat.
Yes, well,
Right.
no
Right.
news.
Anne. Pat, hang on a minute. I got to build Pat up a minute. Right. Pat. We have done the difference between a cesspit and what else?
Septic tank.
Yes, we've done that. We've also found a hotel in Barry that disappeared, and we found it again. Right.
Yes.
Anne has told us about the Wi-Fi, and we have told to go to the Apple shop. We are really getting into it tonight. We have worked out where the Holy Grail was found, and now you've got to beat that.
I can't. I've been watching Caesar attacking the Gauls. It's in 3 sessions. Watching that. So I
Cool.
fell asleep and I missed a bit of it. He had a rough time trying to win that. I think it was, they said it was his doomsday war.
Caesar. Did you?
Right, we're going to crack on a minute, Pat. Can I just make a
Yeah.
people in these films, right? We spend an incredible amount of time producing material for you, right? There's people being hacked to bits, right? Arms being cut off, screaming. There's death. There's bondage. There's everything, and you fall asleep.
I was after breakfast.
Oh, don't mind me. Spend millions of pounds on this production, right? And you just go to sleep. Fine, that's it. I may as well not bother.
No, I winded back and watched
Yeah,
it.
yeah, you should wind your blooming head in. Right, okay, then that's fine. That's good. Excellent. Right, all right, then we're gonna crack on, right? And we're going to all right, let me start off with this, right? I decided, right, that we're gonna be not looking at all the nice colourful photographs in this book tonight, but we might look at a couple. But then again, if we do, it's not gonna work. I decided to introduce access analysis, right? And we're gonna go through the photographs in my master's thesis, right? From the University of Highlands and Islands, and it must have been useful because that thesis got me my master's degree in the first place and got me a meeting with Princess Anne. So there we go. And if you want proof, of this, right? There is Princess Anne. There she is, right? And there's me having a good old conversation with Princess Anne, right? In a hall where everybody's going quiet and we're talking about all sorts of things. Anyway, the university never invited me back up there. Funnily enough,
Joe talked to Lady Diana.
I talked to Lady Diana.
When she came to the Mint.
Hang on a minute.
It's all right. It's all right. Honestly,
Anne, hang on a minute. Hang on, Anne. I was talking about my moment of glory, right? And you just thrown it away. Right. So what?
I think it's wonderful that you had your masters from the island and islands of Lady Anne, Princess Anne.
Princess Anne, you silly woman.
Especially
yeah. Oh, yeah. You know what? It's all gone to pot now, right? Because I've got right. Okay, right.
What are we going to talk about today?
I just told you what we're going to talk about. Please listen. Right, if I type in dissertation, right, we're going to get straight to dissertation because it's on my email, right? Oh God, no, not master's degree. I don't want that. Right. The problem is with doing it this way and the technology is I can't already set it up beforehand. I don't know why. Right. So what we're going to do? We're just going to scroll through these things, right? And we'll get to. I think it's that one. If I type in and there it is. There's my old university number 16013044. It was like a yeah. It's my number for the university. There you
No,
go.
your
Have
prison
you had
number.
your thesis published?
Oh uh, look. I can't talk about my prison number, right? Because I may have played a prisoner recently, but I'm not going to do that. Not going to even talk about that. Right, so it will slowly come up on the screen. Right, so I have told you a lot about access analysis. Right, and the biggest problem is when I get this document up on the screen. Right, it's we're just going to have to stick with it. Right, and it will come up in a moment. So we're gonna be talking about the site of Scatness. And hopefully this will come up. If not, we've got the other stuff that I said I wasn't going to do. Right, I'm hopefully gonna whatever. Right, come on, work, please work. Not opening. Hang on a minute. It's not opening. Come on, please open. It opened last night. Oh, come on. If we go back out and we'll try and open it again. Right there. Oh, it's got the little thingy box. It should open now. Come on. Device there. Why is it not working? Oh, God. Not working. It's not opening. Hang on. Right, do it again. Right there. Oh, very frustrating. Oh, okay. Well, I'll see if I can get it on the other thing now. See if I can open it on this, and we'll just transfer devices. Hang on. It will happen in a moment. If people are if and tell us something very useful and interesting.
Well, that's the only thing that they were talking about Iona. Actually, it was on. I can't remember now if it was on on the news as well, but they were talking about the monastery
Yeah, go on.
and that it was Saint Cuthbert who went round and established these places in 500 something, 500. And I
Yes,
couldn't believe Iona was so flat. There's not much to it, really. You
isn't it?
know, but it has got one mountain or one hill. So I'm trying to think of the guy. He's Snow, Mr. Snow, the young one.
Dan Snow.
Dan Snow's son. Or it is Dan
Um,
Snow, is it?
yeah, he's still a Snow.
Yeah, he does this thing on a Sunday morning, and he goes on sort of retreat.
Anne, you can shut up now. I'm on it. Good.
Right.
Thanks for that, Anne. Right. So basically, we've managed to get in here, and the whole point. Welcome today to my look at access analysis and how we understand things from the past using this wonderful technique. And this technique is something that I've mentioned quite a few times. I've also mentioned a guy by the name of Tim Ingold, right? And
Yes.
Tim Ingold, yes, we mentioned that. And on a Wednesday evening, we used to do my sort of access analysis. We used to do all sorts of weird things, right? And by the way, there's a guy who fancies you online, Anne, who's called the Dodgy Git. And he mentioned Cuthbert, a monk, and hermit. There you go, Anne. That's for you with your Iona thing.
Yes,
Right,
that's right.
right, Anne, that's fine. We've got to get that over and done with. Let's get it back into the lecture. Right. People move in lines and need to understand lines in order to know where they can go. Right. So, in other words, history, how we see things is a progression, and also how we wander around our houses, how people wandered around buildings in the past. It's all following lines. It's all following a sense of success. Right, I'm actually. It's a shame you can't see me, because I'm actually my hands are going all over the place and like pointing and doing this. Right, one thing that we used to do on a Wednesday evening, we used to talk about the building that I'm in now, the building. And I used to say that I used to occasionally take people outside, and I used to say, these are the um these are the bits of wood in the ground. These are the posts in the ground. And I don't know if any of you saw any of this, so some of you may remember it, but I can remember standing in the middle of the building and saying, even though there's just posts in the ground and there's nothing between the posts, I feel like I'm in a space, right? And then when I went in the field, I said, look, it's like a big field, and it's like a huge, massive field, and the field feels endless. And let's go back into the space of the posts. And then you had a sense that you were inside a space, right? Even though you could see directly between the posts into this open space beyond, but you felt enclosed by these posts. And that's something that is was emulated, and that idea and sense of context had emulated from this whole thing of movement and lines and context, right? And it actually come from, you know, doing this sort of piece of work for the university's Highlands and Islands access analysis. And basically, what access analysis is one. This is the building at Scatness that I said. The building, the long circular, the building on the right is actually building number 12, and the building on the right is building number 8. Right, and the point with these two buildings is that the circular one was built first, and the building on the right was built next, right? And the point of access analysis is to get an idea how you move within the building, and this is a simplified plan of how you would move in a building, right? And we do look at these images. Well, actually, when you go into this building, you could actually go beyond the backs of these, and you can actually go out there as well, right? So there's a little bit more complex than that, how you move around buildings. But the point is, how you move around buildings is very, very important. And what I basically thought, instead of sort of cutting out images from this document, I thought, right, I'd get up on screen, which we successfully managed to do after a little bit of a delay tonight. We managed to get up on the screen, right? And then basically I just thought, right, it'd just be better to see what we've got because they're clearer, right? Now, when in our houses, for example, I'm just gonna I live in a round house, right? But it's not a round house. It's got double glazed windows, and it's got lighting, and it's got a wood burner there, and we've got a toilet over there, and we've got a little kitchen, we've got gas, right? But and we've got water, and but the point is that my life is more simplified than your lives. For example, I get out of bed, right? And then I can just go over there, there's the toilet, right? And I can just, right, okay, I can then wash my hands, and I got the kitchen over there, and I could just go back and lie in bed with a cup of tea. Well, you guys can't do that because oh, shut up, Anne, you're different.
Bungalow.
No, what I'm trying to Anne.
I know.
You've missed the point. The point is that you've got to go through doors. You've got to go through passageways, right? I don't need to do that. Now, the point is, and this is the point, you can see the point. So comparisons of use within two near contemporary but wildly separated settlements. So when we talk about contemporary, these buildings and the use of these buildings in the moment in time that we're looking at them today date to AD 100, right? So we look at a site on Shetland, which is a Iron Age site which uses a lot of stone, and the site known as the Ditches, Bagenden, which is in Gloucestershire, right, which is in fact a Roman era site, exactly the same time, where in fact the Roman era site uses the likes of wattle and daub, and it uses low-lying walls, and you've got a roof, whether it's thatched or tiled, but these are very different structures than the site at Scatness, right? Now, when we think about all of this, and we go through, and somebody says law states 2 doors between toilet and kitchen, well, I haven't got any doors between this open area and the kitchen, so I've broken the law already. But anyway, the point is that the concept of space to the modern idea And the old idea was actually divided in this period that we're talking about, AD 100, whereas in Roman era Britain, they had doorways and they had rooms and they had passageways. Whereas with a site like this is very different. It acts very, very different. And this is what we're looking at, that sort of comparison. So basically that's our site of Scatness. And that's I do believe taken from the book itself. Actually, this is quite a good image, so I'm not sure exactly taken from the book. This might actually be anyway. I think, yeah, anyway, so what you can see here, two things, is that this building here is the building we're going to look at. So what we've got we've got the Broch here, B, we've got building 12, and we've got building 8, right? That's what we're interested in. Now, building 12 is a bigger version of this reconstructed building over here. Now, that reconstructed building uses a lot of stone, right? And inside that, to hold the roof up, it's got these pillars. And in fact, it's got these pillars themselves, i.e. a wheelhouse, and the entranceway is over by here. Now, the pillars themselves support a corbelled roof, which we'll have a little look at. Pat's used to corbelled roofs. She's been in damp places with me looking at corbelled roofs. On the I think Pat must have seen half a dozen corbelled roofs when we were in Orkney. But the point is that this actually supported a stone roof, right? And is that an open space in the middle? Did actually an open space exist with these buildings? And the point is, when we looked at this before, and we basically come to the conclusion that this building was used 400 years, right? This little bit of the building on the side was used for about 150, right? But and we're talking about there was no light in these buildings, or was there? Were there bits of the building were actually open to the elements? Because when we think about this building over here, right? Hang on, that building over here, you're thinking, hang on a minute. They've got metal working in there, which produce gases, which produces smoke. And when you're obviously working with copper, you've got arsenic, right? So there we go. That's a byproduct of copper. So all that's if it's in an enclosed space, you're not going to live long. But these people used that building for a long period of time. So it must mean that they did something that we really don't understand with these structures. And also the other thing as well that I'm going to look at next week, which I'm not going to really look at now because I was just thinking about it today when I was playing with my turkeys. Right. This building here, this building, and I'll get the line in. This building here, the Broch building, and we've mentioned Brochs before, and we mentioned Brochs now. Brochs themselves can be big conical shaped towers that go 12, 13, 15 meters high in the air. And this would have dominated this landscape, but I'm not saying it would have. I'm not saying the Broch here was 15 meters high like the one at Musa. It may have been about 6, 7, 8, 10 meters high. But then again, you're thinking, why are they so tall? And that's the point. Why are they so tall? Why did they need to build these structures tall as they were? And also one thing I would mention is that these huge Broch-like structures that were up to 15 meters tall would have been some of the tallest structures ever built in Britain. Forget all the Roman stuff, but they were the tallest native built structures ever built in Britain by British people, probably up until the time that the Normans came over here. Probably we're talking about the rebuilding of Winchester and all the rest of it. Those buildings are much taller, right? But native build structures, we don't see native build structures 15 meters tall in Britain until after the Normans, right? Even Anglo-Saxon stuff, these things are incredibly tall, right? But they had the technology to do them out of dry stone. And that's the point. Some Roman structures themselves, interesting, the Roman structures, you could think that some of the basilica structures may have been 10, 15 meters tall vaulting structures, may have been higher than that, but that's Roman era technology. We're talking about British built structures. So these are, and the other thing as well is when you're seeing these huge structures, when you're seeing these huge structures, you're thinking, why did they need to build them so tall in the first place? Why? You know, they're just so tall. They're hugely tall. And why? Why are they so tall? It's not to show off. You could show yourself off, right? Not and you don't need to run across a field to show yourself off, right? You could show yourself off by having a structure, right? That's 5, 6 meters tall. That's bloody tall. That's taller than anything these people would have seen in their lifetimes. But they chose in Shetland, Caithness in Scotland, and Orkney to build them the height that we've said. So, anyways, back to this quote here. This is all done in what order or sequence they occur. This is what we see. How we see these buildings developing, the phases, the layers, everything sort of intermingled, right? It's a sense of order and the sequence, right? And the sequence is how things occur, but they don't need to be in a date order. Sequence can be A, B, C, X. It doesn't need to have any particular set alphabetical or numerical order, but order it is. Everything's ordered in life, right? As a bee flies around and does that sort of number 8 thing as it sort of flies around the likes of to get the honey from the flowers. As a dog might need to go out and run around the field, or a cat needs to go out and kill rats. It's all a sequence, right? And it can be in an order or whatever. So this is what we're talking about. This is what we're also talking about, buildings, right? So again, this is an incredibly long document. We're not going to read the document at all. As you can see, it's 120 pages long. Last night we only got to about page 60 with the images, and I ended up apologizing because we didn't actually get onto the Roman stuff. So bees don't levitate at all. Somebody's saying that bees levitate online, but I don't think they do. But anyway, Scatness on the Shetland Islands, and the ditches. Sorry, I'm chucking random stuff in. The ditches, where it says an S on there, it's slightly a bit further north up, just above the L on London. And that is the place known as the ditches, Bagenden, which is actually north of Cirencester. And I got to be honest with you, it was so great to sort of have a huge intercourse with the artifacts in the back room, right? Handling stuff which no archaeologists have handled for ages, right? And I was looking in these boxes of the artifacts. It was so bloody great. Yeah. And I've shown you some of the images in this document. And the one thing as well is, right, I'm going to say it as I said last night, when I completed this and I handed the dissertation in, right, this is the other than this week, this is the first time I've looked at this document in I think 6 years. Right, I got my master's degree on the back of it, but I just thought, oh my god, I could have done better. But it actually looks pretty good. So if anyone does want a copy of this, let me know at the end, and they can read through all the stuff themselves. So moving on, and we're basically on the lower bit there to look at Scatness, and of Shetland, and there it is, and there's the peninsula, which will be a familiar plan. Now on here, it's got 2 sites. It's got Old Scatness, which we're looking at, and Giles Hoff, and the airport is basically the runway is where the word in Scatness is. That's the runway, and it's the runway that you cross in your car as planes are landing. No, I can't make it up. It happens. I can remember that the plane was landing when we went there, and there was a guy standing on the road saying, "Oh, don't go at this minute. There's a plane landing." Right. So we decided to go across the runway anyway. But anyway, we didn't. The plane didn't crash. Anyway, I wasn't driving as my university lecturer. He was nuts as well. And the site is. Yeah, Henry knows all this. So we're looking in Gloucester there. There's good old Gloucester. And there's Cirencester, and the site of the ditches, Bagenden, and it was great. It was great. I tell you what, don't take your car to Cirencester, right? Because they're really weird about where you park, right? I remember getting back to my car, and there's a guy standing alongside my car saying, "You shouldn't be parking here," right? It was really strange. Anyway, so anyway, getting through all this, and and this will come into play now. Bone objects, right? Now, one interesting thing as well is with the context of archaeology, when you're finding things in archaeology, it's just the thing that You know, in some places, wood doesn't survive and bone doesn't survive. Statues of Lloyd George don't survive and all those things. But when you look at both these sites, you do get similar types of material surviving in two different worlds at the same time. So if you want to make a comparison, Japan, Great Britain, two different worlds at the same time. That's exactly what we're talking about. Right. And somebody said, you can't park in Cirencester, it's a nightmare. Well, there you go. Oh, awesome. Oh, yeah, bone pin. There it is. Lovely bone pin. And it may have been a hairpin, it may have been a cloak pin, but I was able to handle these things. Isn't it great? Love it. Anyway, moving on. And as we sort of go back down to the two sites, don't need to know that. We're doing this anyway. So this is a site that we're actually looking at in the archaeology. And the one thing that you do see with the archaeology, it's very different when you actually conserve when they actually conserve the site. It's like very sterile, very aspic, you know. And what you do clearly see with the site is that it looks jumbled. And when we do this in archaeology and we try to sort of make things more accessible, naturally we put a membrane down, and we put gravel down, and we sort of do conservation stuff for the wall, right? And that's what they did with this site. So it looks very different. And what just to give you a bit of an idea, so basically that's the entrance, that's the way in, right? And the fireplace is basically in the middle, right? And initially you could wander behind all these, right? But some of them closed up in later. And that's the actual way into room 8. And there is actually a blocked up doorway in this area, which was never actually excavated. So the point is, you know, when we look at the other images, the images I actually took on site, because we're looking at this wonderful site that had been preserved and recorded and left for future generations to wander around and look at. And that's what we're going to look at. And this is what we base our principles and ideas on, that we look at the idea of access and analysis, and syntax, if anyone's ever heard of that. It's a mathematical formula. First time I've ever needed to do maths. So this is a little bit of water. We're on page 15 so far. This is a little bit of water, right, which is by Scatness. And I'm standing there, and that there, hang on, not that. That there's the runway, and you can see that there's no barriers on the runway. I think it's absolutely quite fascinating. There's the runway there. So basically, when we got off the plane, the pilot said, "Oh, by the way, just a few months ago, a plane crashed in the sea." Right. And there was also another plane that had to avoid a car going past the runway. Right. So the airmail van, the airmail craft went into the sea as well. So it was really, really good listening to all that. After we had circled the island of Shetland for a whole hour, after the landing gear wasn't working, and we may have actually had to land in the sea. I would have made the news as well. Top class archaeologists visiting Shetland to visit the archaeology at Scatness, landed in the sea with a bump and got out the water and decided to look at the archaeological remains of Scatness. That would have been so great, but it didn't happen. Things you wish for. Shut up, Anne. Just think, Anne could have gone to the class in Bridgend on the Thursday and told everybody Carl's plane crashed. Yeah, that would have been good. Actually, Anne, it was a Thursday that I think Peter gave the class, right? Yes, it would have been so good. And Pat would have been worried and crying her little eyes out, thinking, "Oh my God, I'm never going to see Carl again." But he's having a wonderful time. You can imagine it, can you? Carl, just shut up. Right, Anne, shut up. Right, so in other words, this is the Brock site, not at Scatness. This is the Brock site at Gurness on Orkney. And this is we did the Brock at Gurness, right? And the one difference between this site, the Brock, and the settlement, and is that the Brock at Gurness is better preserved than the Brock at Scatness, whereas the settlement at Gurness is not as well preserved as the settlement is very well preserved at Scatness. Just as a comparison there. Good. And what you can actually see in between the walls, right, is you can actually see the cavity in the wall. And that is the cavity this is the double cavity wall of these Brock sites. And we love Brocks, don't we? And up for the Brocks. And I know you want to say something, but nobody's interested. But anyway, the point is, this is we do love you. We all love you. Goff particularly loves you. The difference between this Brock at Gurness, Anne, is that it's not been divided like the Brock, which was converted into a wheelhouse at Scatness, right? So the one at Scatness evolved much more than the Brock at Gurness, right? So anyway, so I'm moving up a bit, moving on a bit. Anne, I tell you what, Anne, doesn't that look truly phallitic, right? It's just this great conical shaped tower. It's the thing we dream of in life. Goff used to dream of this tower, right? He used to feel that he needed to embody this tower always, right?
The tower the other night.
What?
Not this one though.
No, you didn't. Shut up. Right. Anyway, this is the Broch of Musa, right? And by the way, this is one image that I took. I was there, and it was so good. And yes, so it was very good actually. They nearly left me on the island because it took so long to get on the boat. But other than that, right, this is the Broch of Muta, right? This is the one that's in places between 12 and 13 meters high today. You can imagine. Look at the size. Look at the absolute oomph on that. Now, the settlement associated with this building is long since gone, right? I don't know what Pat's on about. She's having a bit of. And don't worry, you've wrecked the lecture. I was straight bang in the middle of it, but don't worry about it. But anyway, right. Anyway, it makes a change for man. But you can see there's no windows in it. The doorway is actually on the seaside, right? Which is on the left-hand side of the image, right? And basically, we're looking from the south, and the entranceway is on the westerly side, and it points out over to the sea. There was a little bit more land there, but you can get to the Brocha Musa if you get onto a little ferry boat. And somebody said that they don't really understand what the hell I'm on about, but I do. Anyway, so there you go. To illuminate, was the Brocha Scatness this high? I doubt it. In my little caption there, it says Musa Broch could be illustrative of the original height of Scatness. Illustrative. It doesn't mean to say it was, right? And what's all this got to do with access analysis? We're building up to it, Anne. Leave it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. So when we think of the archaeology, and when we try to look around the archaeology, this is actually the other entrance, the other passageway into building 12 that is actually closed off, right? So we can't know. But the one thing I would say that there's stuff at these sites that are not excavated. Archaeologists don't always excavate stuff. We leave stuff for future generations. So bits of what we're doing today is based on this wonderful book, The Broch and Iron Age Village, right? Lovely book. Yeah, it's really nice. I got a copy of it. It's great. And the illustrations in it are absolutely fantastic. They really, really are. So, but this again is the site that we've actually seen. We know this site. We're going to actually move on. This is another angle of it, right? And you can get an idea where the Broch is really being excavated, and you can see. I just want to point out a few things for us, Anne. Shut up. I just want to point out a few things for us, right? So there's a circular Broch. Right. Interesting enough, the relationship with the circular Broch and our building here. So this is building 12, and that's the small building on the side. And the way into the building is via here. Right. So this way. Right. And there's another way out there. There's another way out. And there was a passageway that went that way, but isn't with us anymore today. You can get an idea that the site is extremely complex. So when I was doing my master's degree, I had the question, oh, are you going to do the whole of the site at Scatness and try to do an access analysis involving the whole site at Scatness? And I said, yeah, it would be easy. And I'm glad I didn't, because we just needed to occupy one building. Otherwise, my report would have been hundreds and hundreds of pages long, and that wouldn't have been good. But anyway, moving on. And I got really excited with this. I had a moment. When I was holding Michelle's hand, looking deeply into her eyes, the university lecturer said, "You two, stop it!" And he pointed down to the ground, right? And and basically there was some clay, and there was some bits of clay in amongst the stones. Now the way they're building these 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 likes of structures out of dry stone walls. The way they're doing it is actually they're building the dry stone walls first, right? So all the masonry sets and the stone sort of everything counteracts, because if you put clay in between the beds of these dry stone buildings, right, when the clay's washed out, the whole thing will collapse. Right. So you build it out of stone initially, right? And then what you do, you take dollops of clay and you just go bang, go on, another one, bang, into all the gaps, bang, bang, bang. You put the clay in, but this is going to be on the inside. You can't put the clay on the outside, because the clay on the outside of the buildings is all going to wash away, right? But so when they excavated the Scatness, this is the site of Giles Hoofed. And so this is an example from Giles Hoof, and basically we did actually find red bits of clay. So this is the way they built. When I was working in Spain, right, I used to hold my little my little daughter Bethan, right, and I used to take dollops of clay and I used to chuck it up, because we're doing restoration work in Spain as well, and that's how they did restoration work. The little gaps in the wall, you just chuck it at the wall. Restoration, job done. Spanish way of doing it. But anyway, the way they did the dry stone building was the dry stone wall building first, and then you chuck the clay in there, because otherwise it would be a right mess. Just didn't work. But mind you, this is why medieval buildings really didn't stand up very long, because what medieval buildings did, Richard will tell you this, when the archaeologists excavated the Roman site, not the Roman site, the medieval site at Highlight, right, they found out that they used like a reddish sort of off type clay that they actually got from the old harbour in Barry, right? But they used that red clay in the beds. So you'd put stone down, you'd put a layer of this sort of clay, you'd put stone. But unfortunately, when all the clay washed out, you had huge subsidence, the whole buildings collapsed. And this is what you see at Cosmeston. Remember when we used to go to Cosmeston, and we occasionally used to see the excavations? We went hand in hand and we saw the buildings with red bits of clay, right? And they weren't really good. That's what you're talking about. But so they knew how to build much better in the likes of this Iron Age. So there it is. There's the circular reconstruction in the background, right? And was this building in the forefront here, the building number 12, was it built in, was the reconstruction, which is in the background, there we go, that reconstruction built to emulate this building? Now, we don't really know. We don't really know how these buildings eventually looked. But what we've got with this building is the reconstruction. It's not, the reconstruction is very aspic, right? It's very, as the words would be, there's a word that I use later on, reconsolidate and reconstructed. But so basically what they've got, the floor probably may have not looked like this at all, but as a reconstruction, as to get people around going, little children going, "Oh, daddy, look at that there, it's wonderful, what's this?" and all the rest of it, right? So basically the fireplace was actually in the middle. There it is. And there's the entranceway to building, hang on, get rid of that. There's entranceway to building number 12. No, start again. There's entranceway into building number 8, because this is building number 12. And you come in from sort of hang on, get rid of that. Get rid of that. You come in from this sort of angle, right? And how this all worked and functioned. And that's exactly what we're going to look at. Do you know, I got flying ants in my house here, which is a bit weird. Anyway, you don't want to know that, do you? Never mind. So again, we've got the reconstruction, reconsolidation. There it is, and there is actually the archaeology. Remember, a reminder of that. So this idea of access analysis, this is how the building looked in stage 5B, right? Not 5A, 5B. There you go. The phasing in archaeology, right? And this is how it looked finally, and how it all flowed when they understood and excavated it, right? Now, what we're going to mention, right, is some keywords, right? And the first keywords are not that. The first keywords is C3, C1, and C2. These are communal areas, right? These are communal spaces, right? And that'll come more apparent in a short while when we expand on what this is. And these are the individual cells, right? These are the points that you might end up in, right? And obviously all these, right? So that's very important when you think about access analysis. So the way this worked initially, right? So what you do, hang on, what's happened? Right, there we go. So what would happen is initially you just had this building, right? And eventually what happened is they added a porch, which is here. And then obviously they added this building, which is building 8. So it makes things a lot more complicated. Initially, there was another entranceway into this building, right? But that closed down. So obviously you've got another exit, and you've got this as an entranceway, right? Now, when I was talking about this last night, I basically said that as people, we've got different ways how we move around the house. So there were a couple of, for example, when I go to my parents' house, did any of you ever used to watch Last of the Summer Wine? So when I go to my parents' house, my mum puts newspaper down because I've always covered in shit, and I've got mud, and I smell like a farmer. And remember the guy on Last of the Summer Wine, Nora Batty used to put the newspapers down. That's what it's like. So I always go through the back door, right? Whereas visitors to my parents' house go in through the front door, right? My brother goes in through the front door, right? But other relatives go in through the back door, right? Can you see why it's important to think how we enter structures? And people do it in different ways, and people may have done it in different ways in the past, depending on who they were, right? You may have entered this building via 7, right? But most people, because you've got a porch area in C2, most people would enter it that way, right? It's the sense of familiarity and understanding of the building. Now, are we thinking that this building was very dark most of the time, or is there something in this that they may have had a suspended roof, right? That you had light coming in. Therefore, the gases and the toxins that were created in building 8 would not be present. So all of those questions need to be asked. But access analysis is dependent on how you move around the building. And a blind person will tell you that they could wander around Barrytown, and they would be able to understand where all the shops were. They'd be able to understand where all the crossings were. They would be able to understand where all these other things were, and they're blind, right? If this building was a dark building, you need to know where everything is. You need to be able to function and feel. But if this was a dark building all the time, how are people going to be able to work in here, right? Because if you're going to keep this lit, for example, there's a point to be made here. This building's a lot bigger than the building that I'm living in, but my building's circular like this building, but I don't have piers like this one, right? Now, to light the fire that I've got in here uses an incredible amount of wood, right? And that's just for me, Michelle, the 2 cats. Yeah, we've got 2 cats, unfortunately, now. Yeah. And it uses a lot of fuel, right? And to be honest with you, I haven't had to light it today. Right, I lit it yesterday, I lit it the day before, and the day before that. We've used a lot of wood, right? Now, this type of building would have had a fire burning 24/7, right? So that tells you 2 things. How were they able to get the amount of fuel together to burn 24/7, right? But they did. That means one thing, that there was a lot more wood on Shetland in the Iron Age than meets the eye, right? Because they were able to they had to keep the fire burning. Why do they have to keep the fire burning? Approximately where C1 is, they need to keep it burning because you needed to have hot water. and the hot water is useful for tanning. The hot water is useful for your food. The hot water is useful for washing things. The hot water is useful for loads of different industrial processes, right? You know, and you might, and the other thing as well is one thing that I mentioned as well, which was quite fitting last night, right? One thing I mentioned last night, which was quite fitting, is these people lived lives that were based upon a principle that they didn't wake up in the morning necessarily had breakfast. They didn't wake up in the morning and had dinner at 12 o'clock. They didn't wake up in the morning and had tea at 7 o'clock. Because in this next door to this building, right, this is as you go into the building, right, there's a communal zone, and this is sort of as you enter the building, right. Now this itself is when you know people if they were involved in industrial processes like industrial processes, if we go over to where that building is on the left, which says C3, that's building 8. If you're involved in industrial processes and you're involved in iron smelting or copper smelting, right, or you're making pots, right, you need to be manning that locality 24/7. Naturally, you're not going to be awake 24/7. Somebody's going to take over. But as you're keeping the fire and keeping an eye on the temperature, right, making sure that the temperature is the right temperature, and you're looking at it and you're keeping an eye on it. Again, if it's very smoky and you're not going to be able to see anything, right? So this makes me think that there's other light being used in here, natural light being used in here. It's not smoky. So they're going to have to eat food on the hoof, right? So in other words, right, can you keep an eye on the bellows a minute? I'm just going to go into the room and get something to eat quickly, right? So you dip your vessel into the cauldron, which has got the food in. You take it with you, you eat that, and it's fine, right? These are the lives that they lead. And actually, weirdly enough, right, my life has become very much like that. I often I don't have a meal until I get to the end of the day thinking, Christ, I haven't eaten, because I'm either involved in doing some writing, or I'm either involved in maybe teaching like this, or I might be involved in looking after the sheep. I might be doing some acting or whatever. I'm doing loads of different things, right? I don't really have time to have set hours of this and that, right? So I can understand how these people were. And again, somebody's saying lots of assumptions. Life is like lots of assumptions, right? We can't really be sure and specific about what these structures are about and how this all functioned. Right now, that's corbelling. Now, this is corbels, and one thing that I would say, right, above these individual cells. Did they support corbel? Did they support individual corbel celled roofs? The answer is probably not. Right? There is other examples. For example, that in wheel houses had these piers that were a lot more stronger. Get rid of that. These piers that joined the walls that we'll see later on, and you could have individual corbelled roof structures. But in this structure, you're not that lucky. Right. We'll look at examples of that in a short while. So what we've got, for example, that's corbelling. Now, this is corbelling within individual bits. Basically, when you go in through the walls at Musa, right, you're going up steps, and little bits of corbelled cells, right? So you're going up the steps, and another little bit of a corbelled thing, and they take the weight. You know, they're within the walls, within the zones of the walls, right? And the point is that corbelling is the stronger and easy way of creating a roof space, right? But corbelling only works over small areas, right? This is why the Romans invented the Pantheon, right, where you've got that beautiful domed concrete roof space, right? That's a form of corbelling, right? But it's not corbelling at all. But it's emulating something like this, right? Which is earlier technology, which is made of dry stone, and this is what they did. Now, when we think about this, we understand. Um, we think about somebody's mentioned as well about with this type of site that we're talking about, we've got fish on the doorstep, fruit on the trees and bushes. They'd have had food everywhere, but it would be eat or lose. So storage critical through winter in icy places. But the thing is, that's one of the things as well. There's a point to be made there. If you've got a cauldron burning 24/7 in the middle, right? You don't really need to keep things fresh because they go into the cauldron. When I when I first met Michelle and I lived in a house in Barry, in Gladstone Road in Barry, right? I don't know if you ever went to Gladstone Road, Anne, but my house in Gladstone Road in Barry had a house, and
Yeah.
can you remember my slow cooker in the kitchen? You used to go into the kitchen. I used to have my slow cooker, right? And I used to go down to the beach and I used to have samphire and I just to take it home and chuck it in the slow cooker. Well, I would chuck everything in the slow cooker, right? And when I'd get some bread, which I'd usually snaffle from the bins at Iceland, right? And I would take a scoop out of the slow cooker, right? And I'd dip some bread in it. Easy.
Yeah.
I didn't really use my fridge much, because I would always have stuff which was
Well, the humble
cooking.
saucepan is often being used like that.
Exactly. Oh, do you know what? That was my key to my stir fry, right? And you tried my stir fry, didn't you? It was absolutely gorgeous.
Um, well, I don't remember.
Anyway, my children love my stir fry, but I never ever told them I never ever washed the stir fry thing out, right? Because
The wok,
that
the
gave it
wok.
its flavor. My wok, oh. Anyway, so what we've got? This is the point. Would these little things have supported the ceiling? No, they wouldn't have, right? And this is the point. What are they doing in this structure? But the point is at times what they did in parts of this building, they filled up the backs of these, right? In and that would mean an individual cell,
Hmm.
right? But
And it helps
some of
you to
the
get
some
up. When there's a stick there, it helps you to get up when you're sitting on the floor.
well, these were inevitably in there, and but this building worked very differently, and then this is how we get into the access analysis. Our friend online, he's saying, you've got your ducks, you've got your geese, you've got your fish, you've got your deer, you've got pigs, cows, horse meat, statues of Lloyd George. It's all available in the Iron Age. I don't know if people ate statues of Lloyd George, but that's another thing. You can see that this is a little exit number 7, right? This is likely to have been added into the structure later, right? And you can see a
Don't you
nice
think
little.
that they were stalls for animals? No.
Well, the thing is, you've got to think practically, Anne, right? You've got to think
Yeah.
practically. People are living in these buildings, right?
Yeah.
And there's
Animals
living
outside.
with animals around is a bit overrated.
Hmm.
um you know with pigs and sort of cows living amongst these buildings. Sheep are easier to keep, you see, because
Yeah.
the stuff that exits a sheep is usually in pellet form, and they're quite easy
Hmm.
to pick up from, right? I mean, you may have had lambs and other things kept in these buildings. Anyway, back to this bit of the building, right? This bit of the building, if we go back at the screen, right, that sort of exit sort of thing, is this little thing here. And this has been placed in later on, more likely because beforehand, what they sort of understand in the archaeology is that these were actually like this, right? And what they've done, they filled in the backs of them as part of a later stage to actually have this exit. And it's very interesting that you've got this sort of development, these very different phases within the structure. And they've done a great job with the reconstruction. It looks pretty snazzy with the reconstruction there. But again, that's an exit. That's an exit for the building. It's quite narrow, but then again, lots of these exits and entrances were quite narrow. And you couldn't imagine people would have been obese in the society.
Right.
People were very busy, even though they probably ate a really good diet. Um, they probably had high metabolisms like me, and they could eat and eat and eat. And they weren't very big. But by the entranceways, by having narrow entranceways, we can get an idea of people's um build, not their height,
Mm.
not their height. The reason why you've got low lintels is that you need to keep the heat into these buildings. This is something that we've learned in this building that I'm in, right? Um, Now, one thing that I've learned with this building is that the doorway should have been a lot lower, right? But then again, if it was a lot lower, every time we'd in and go in and out of the building, we'd bang our head on the beams, right? Um, but this is what they did in the past. They had lower beams, so they actually get in and out, in and out. And also I'm reminded this is a society that has a lot of access to milk. They've got milks for they got remember Anne, the pig's milk yogurts. They've got pig's milk, they got horse's milk, they got milk from goats, sheep, cows, right? And even human milk, right? And all of this, and lots of other milk as well. All of this milk could actually be used to be stored over a long period of time as well. So we've mentioned this with bog butter, um, and a bog cheese, right? And in the museum at Scatness, not in the museum at Scatness, in the museum at Lerwick, which is the big sort of town on Shetland, which is a big city in Shetland. I think it's the only city in Shetland anyway. In the museum there, they've got a big round ball of bog. I think it's bog butter rather than bog cheese, right? And this cheese itself is well over 1,000 years old. And there we go. And not forgetting mushrooms as well. So that's the sort of furnace area in building 8. Again, nice little bit of a restoration. And when you've got a bit of a restoration, you can actually see more. And you can actually see more on how this building worked. And these two bits here, it's very likely that you can get that both of these on the left and the right, both of these are ovens and furnaces, right? Both of these are, and it's likely as well that we've got evidence of staining on the ground, that there's a furnace in there, and we know because we got lots of evidence of slag. We got lots of slag. We've got an iron furnace in here as well. Iron furnaces. Now, there's a point to be made. The roof could not have been wooden in this structure, and the reason why, it can't be stone either, because the stone wouldn't have spanned this space in building 8, right? Because the temperatures that would have been permitted in this building, right, would have been in excess of 1,490 odd degrees C, right? A small, tiny furnace, and you can imagine the amount of heat that's radiating, enough to set light to timber and a thatch from a slight distance, right? Basically, and like the furnaces that we played, me and Anne used to play a lot around at St. Fagans. We used to love going to St. Fagans and seeing, right? The little furnace that me and Anne played with at St. Fagans, right? That's the type of furnace that would have been in here, Anne, right? And that would have been the furnace to produce your iron and your very, very interesting iron objects.
Yeah.
Thanks, Anne. I'm glad you agreed eventually. Anne eventually got there, right? So basically, you've got all these little cells in the building, and there's another point I got to make. So the wall on the left, I've nearly been talking for a whole hour without a break. Pat hasn't even interfered with me once. Anne's been interfered with me a lot in this lecture, but basically on the left there, you've got the horizontal beds of the stone, and on the right there, you've got the vertical slabs that stick out in the air, and basically what this is, you've got two building styles in a building, This doesn't look toward two different building styles that were built by separate phases. It's likely that they used different ways of building in this structure for different purposes, and this is what we're doing. And this is what we can see. But this is what we're talking about with these cells.
Mm.
Now, unfortunately, at Scatness, it's very likely with the building that we're talking about, that that it wasn't built like this inside. At the Broch was when they converted the Broch. These are the cellular-like structures at the Broch. Now, this is at the site of Jarlshof, and when you go to the site of Jarlshof, these are really, really well preserved at Jarlshof. They're as they were, 2,000 years ago. Right, this is the archaeology at Jarlshof. You can actually clearly see, and basically what happened at Jarlshof, they this was all backfilled, and then they built a site on top of it. They built the Viking site, and then they built a medieval site, and it was perfectly preserved. Right, but these are the cellular-like structures that we usually see with a wheelhouse, but probably not with the building 12, because the masonry is not wouldn't have been strong enough to hold this up and have cellular-like things there, right? But this again would have had a sword roof, would have had a stone roof, would have had a corbelled roof, right? And interesting enough, right? This is really interesting, right? I think that bit there is fascinating, right? Because that one single stone is supporting all of this, right? How they managed to do that, I do not know. But what they've had to do in the modern day and age, they've had to put a copper bar down it, and there is the copper bar to actually keep the thing going and
Mm.
make sure it doesn't collapse. Right. But the whole point of this, right, is if the whole building's standing, right, that stone in there doesn't matter because it's all sort of standing, with its all sort of counterweights and sort of so on, right? It's a bit like the building I'm in now, right? If I chainsawed one of these beams down, right, the whole structure would collapse. And it's the same with that. If you pull one of those stones out, right, the whole thing will collapse, right? So everything's sort of integral. Everything's, and yeah, honestly, just one of these timbers, the whole roof will cave in this building, right? And it's very similar to what we're talking like this, right? Because everything in this building is balanced in such a way that that everything stays together as long as one thing doesn't fail. And by the way, this building has stood up for over 2.5 years now. I've only been living it a year and a bit, but there you go. A great achievement, there you go. All women are all invited, here, Goff. Bring them all in. Enough room for a load of women in here. Anyway, so there's Jarlshof. There's the sort of Corblin. Was anything like this? We don't know. But I'm gonna go on to a few images, and then we're gonna say, right, we're gonna stop here. We'll have a little bit of problem getting back to this document after the break, but I'm sure we can give it a go. And one of the things I haven't mentioned is this sort of comparison, which we'll do quickly. So we haven't mentioned the Roman site in the south at all, because it's we're going to mention a little bit about that. So the comparison with the site in the south and the site in the north. Site in the north is a circular sort of not angular site, where this site is angular and linear. And basically what we're looking at is this site is extensively quarried into the ground below, right? So they're quarrying into the ground. So the point is with Scatness site, it builds up, right? The Iron Age site, the Scatness, is built up. The Roman site is built down into the ground, and then they build it up, right? And then above a certain level, right, stone courses finish, and you've got wattle and daub and panels and timber structures and all the rest of it. That was the Roman era Britain. That's what they did. Whereas in Scatness, it was all made of stone. And this is a rather simplistic look. So this is what the building at Bagaden looked like. Roman building at Bagaden, very angular, right? Very organized. You might head into room E, and then you've got an option when you go into room E. Do you actually go into room F? Do you go back outside? Do you go into room D? Or do you go into the courtyard beyond? Right, and you can see that this is very different how a circular building works. A circular building, you go from the outside inside, and you can go into the stalls or you go somewhere else. But this is like a Roman structure. You've got more options. Yeah, you've got more of a sense of where to go and how this all interacts, right? So the one key thing that lots of things they got in common, the Bagadan site has in common that they've got molds at Bagadan. They've got coin molds at Bagadan, the Roman site, and they've got iron and copper molds that they've actually found at the Scatness site. So both sites are working metals, and both sites work in iron and copper and all the rest of it, right? So that's another comparison. So the Roman world, other than the way they're building, right? Other than the way they're building, there are similarities. There are sort of key similarities, and the preservation of materials that we actually still find in the ground. Oh, and it was so good. There's one of the finds bags with loads of the artifacts. And it was good that we I was able to see some of the slag from the iron from the iron furnace workings at Bagadan, the Roman site, which is exactly the same type of slag that they find in the Scatness, exactly the same period of time in history, right? And I think at this point, I think the gesture should be made and said that maybe that sort of comparing the two bits of archaeology. That's what we're talking about, and the distinct differences with the sites. Oh God, I was going to say something quite key then. Hang on a minute. What was it going to be? Right. Oh yes, that's the point I was going to make. It's in my head again. Right. Okay. The point I was going to make is that if the Romans had not invaded Britain and occupied Britain from AD 43. I've said this more than once. I believe that 1066 would have still happened and would be on the same timeline as we are today, right? Even though the Roman civilization influenced Britain, right? After Roman civilization collapsed, most of the Roman towns and cities and villas collapsed within years, if not a few decades, right? The language that the Romans brought over with them, Latin, is not a language that we use today. In fact, Latin was a language that only continued with the monks, right? The only thing the Romans ever gave us, which is a legacy of Rome, is Christianity. But the Irish didn't have the Romans, and they still had Christianity. Do you see the point I'm making there, folks? That we didn't Roman era civilization, right, to give us everything that we've got today. We would have done it anyway, right? The Irish did it. The Scandinavians did it. The Brits would have done it, right? And that is the point. We would have, and actually, if you've seen the architecture on Shetland and Orkney, you actually see that point being stark. And I do believe at this stage of my presentation today, we're going to be in the same situation as we were in Tuesday, that we're not going to be able to get to where we want to be tonight. That's fine. We're on the same timeline or whatever. But the one thing I'm going to mention is that is actually evidence of the point is with this image, it says there quite clearly, this is in Moray, Scotland. It says an Iron Age timber roundhouse, which is exactly the same dimensions as some of the buildings at Scatness. Right, this is one of the larger circular, Scatness, one of the largest circular stone structures from outside wall to the outside wall being about 15 meters in diameter. Right, and you're thinking, well, they had timber structures that were the same dimensions as the ones at Scatness, right? Except this was built out of timber, and the ones at Scatness were built out of stone. A completely different tradition in build, but exactly the same sort of formats of size, and obviously both sets of buildings are circular. So in Scatness in Shetland, as they are in Scotland. So I think what I might do is, because I'm wearing myself out, poor love. But after the break, Anne, after the break, we're going to do, Anne, quiet, please. Thank you. After the break, what we are going to do is we're going to be looking at spatial syntax and access analysis. I basically mentioned this from Hillier and Hansen. Syntaxes and combinatorial structures, which starting from ideas that may be mathematical, unfold into families of pattern types that provide the artificial world of the discrete system with its internal order in knowables. And the brain with its means of retrieving descriptions of them. The syntax is the imperfect mathematics of the artificial. So basically, what there is, all that complicated stuff, what there is that there's a knowable formula to understanding buildings and how people reacted and moved around in these buildings without any assumption, with a clear formula that we're going to look at after the break. And it's not going to be as complex as talking like that. It's going to be a little bit more. Don't know, I even know, like a broken toggle from the ditches. I don't even know why that's in there. But here we go. Access analysis, a means of investigation, the relationship between spatial order and society. No matter whatever way you look at history and archaeology, right? There's always a spatial order. There's always a societal way of seeing how things are in the past, and that's where we are. I think at that moment, right? And here's a question for you: why they put milk at the back? Because it was cold. Right, we're going to take a break now. And by the way, somebody online, the dodgy git, he says he's deeply in love with you, Anne, and he wants to have your phone number. I will hand it to him so he can phone you after the class. Right. Other than that, Anne, have you got anything you want to say?
No, it's very it is complex when you start to look into it. Syntax and etc. And accessibility. Accessibility.
Accessibility is the same thing. By the way, syntax is not the same as tic tacs, Richard. Before you go out and buy them, it's not the same thing. Right, go on, Anne. Anything else?
No, I mean it's just another, another sort of depth of thinking, isn't it? And
Exactly.
yes, I mean it is valid as well, because
Good.
you've only got to have any program now with computers, and it's about accessibility.
Exactly, and how that accessibility
Yeah.
has a direction and a thing. Exactly.
Yeah.
So right.
Okay.
But by the way, I'm going to warn Henry. I might be going over to Ireland soon, Henry. So warn your relatives in Cork.
Underwater
Right,
at the moment.
What's that?
It's underwater at the moment.
Is it? Oh, right, fair enough.
Oh, right. Yes, it must have been. Must be.
Yeah. Well,
Oh,
it's not. It's
I
not my
thought
fault.
Limerick was a bit like that.
Well, lots of people think I'm a bit like that, Anne, but I don't talk about it. Anything you want to say, Henry?
Just two things. One is the impact of lacto intolerance to the if you cited this large amount of milk production.
Can I just mention that certain people are tolerant to different milks, right? So obviously, I can't deal with. I've got lactose-free milk now because I can't deal with normal milk. But I can drink goat's milk by the pint. But I can't have cow's milk. It makes me sick. So basically, I wanted to chuck that in there before you said anything more, Henry. Go for it.
No, it was just whether the milk in the main was turned into hard product, such as your butter and your cheese.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other one was on the Pantheon roof, and whether their roofs had a similarity, having a central hole to act as a ventilation point as well, because the Pantheon has a circular section out of the center of the roof.
And you are completely correct. And the thing is, the point with all of this is that when we look at the tower at Musa, right, and we think it's 12, where you go to the top and you're standing at the highest point, which is 15 meters. So you're standing at that point, and then the height of you standing there, it probably gives the original height of the Broch. And the one point that was made last night is that if you've got a tower that's conical based like this, there's certain types of winds, and certain types of directions of rain that will not affect the internal workings of the Broch. So in places like Shetland and Orkney, and places where I am in West Wales, we actually have more or less horizontal rain. Well, if you've got that type of rain, that's not going to impact in a big way the contents of the Broch. The only way water is going to get into the Broch is if it's a certain diagonal or it's going direct. And that's one thing that we were thinking about last night, but we didn't actually go anywhere with it. And it's that thing that we've got in our modern day society. We see that rain coming into our homes is excessively detrimental. But obviously, if you've got a hearth in the middle of a house and it's burning, and suddenly the rain comes down and it's putting out the hearth, that's not going to work. But if you've got some kind of vent system with these types of structures, like you mentioned with the Pantheon, it takes on a different aspect to try and understand how these structures function. But I can't see these structures functioned with one way in and maybe another way out, and no lights, no nothing inside these structures. It doesn't fit easy. And then we go back to what me and Henry found in Ireland, where there were windows described in some Iron Age structures, and we're starting to look at these structures in a completely different way. Anything else, Henry, before we crack on? No.
Well, not, no,
Okay,
I was just going to say there's a very nice Parmesan cheese shop outside the Pantheon entrance. Well, worth looking up.
Oh, shut up, you silly man. Right. Talking about silly men, Richard.
No, nothing from me.
And I can't call Goff silly because he gets really upset if I do. Goff, is there anything you'd like to say, darling?
Well, I got a bit lost in that last bit. Where's Bagadan?
Right. I showed you at the beginning. Bagadan is actually the Roman villa that is actually near Cirencester, which I showed you on the map. That is the site known as the Ditches. The comparison with the Roman site in Cirencester, which is hundreds of miles south, which is a linear sort of site. That's the site known as the Ditches. So yeah, that's the Roman site.
Okay, got it. Oh no,
Good.
no.
And the dodgy git who's asking for Anne's phone number online, he's saying, so here we go. He's talking about, people having fat from cheese, right? And yes, I think that's as much as I can get from that. Right? Anything from you, Pat? And shall I give him your phone number so he can phone you in the break? She's thinking about it. Right. Okay.
Sorry. Yes, it was nice thinking about all these things in different ways, and you're sort of putting people in those buildings rather than just looking at, stones falling down. You can think of people, walking.
Yeah, exactly.
Making their way and stuff. I always remember you saying something about the chickens were underneath the front door, and that's
right. Yeah. But basically, what we've got is we've got when we think about, hang on a minute, I just got put my power in. When we're thinking about roundhouses, that's a really interesting one. You're not going to get this through these stone buildings. But when we're thinking about roundhouses, people couldn't work out why when you went into these, when they excavated these roundhouses, that there was a depression in the threshold of the roundhouses, and archaeologists immediately thought, oh well, that's because people, when they go into these roundhouses, they're wearing that area around the entranceway, and it's creating a depression. Well, then archaeologists who spent the night at Butser, the Iron Age site reconstruction, and in Hampshire, I think it is. And when some of the archaeologists spent the night there, they spent the night with chickens. And then in the morning, they couldn't work out why the chickens would go to the doorway, right, and have mud baths by the doorway, because it's the doorway which would lighten up first and dry out first. And that's where the chickens would go, and they would have the baths by the doorway, and it was the chickens who were making the depression in the doorway area. Bingo. And that was by complete accident. By the way, Anne, the dodgy git actually thinks you're a witch. On that note, we're
No, I'm
gonna
not
take,
a witch. I'm not a witch.
because you're a Catholic. I told him that. He's a Catholic boy as well. Right, okay, we have to take a short break, because we're not gonna make sense of this unless, so we're gonna take a just under 10-minute break. So it's 8:47 now. We want to be back just before what?
Oh, yeah, carry on.
And just get on with it. I gotta have a drink. Goff needs to
Yeah,
see his lady.
Pat,
And
I'm talking to Pat. Are you all right,
oh
Pat?
well, you talk to Pat then. Don't bother about me. Just go away. I'll speak to you in a.
You want to talk to me?
Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, all's
Good,
well.
good.
Yeah,
Are
I
you
thought of
busy
some.
on? Oh, I'll have to. It's all right. It's all right. We'll leave it like that.
Yeah, I thought of some place we could go for
To say
lunch.
anything now?
I thought of some place we'd go out for lunch, and I've forgotten where it was. So when I figure out where it was, I'll give you a ring.
Your number, my number.
Yeah, well, no, I know your number. I just can't remember the name of the place that I thought we should go. It's just left my head, you know.
For coffee
For lunch. For lunch. Yeah.
on Friday.
Yeah. Well, no, not
I'll give you a message. I think I might be going. No, yeah, I'll give you a ring.
I haven't remembered the place it was yet. So
Costa Rica.
What?
Oh, I've forgotten what it's called now.
Well, not the one in the whatchamacallit,
The Odeon.
Pines. The what?
The Odeon.
Oh, that's see the movie. Yeah, or the shop. No, I thought we'd stay away from there. We go somewhere
Oh,
else, somewhere
All
nice.
right.
But I
Okay.
can't remember where it was. So as soon as I remember, I'll give you a ring.
All right. Okay.
If you think of anywhere, let me know. It's just somewhere.
Yeah, Friday.
Nice lunch. Yeah, not this Friday, but
Not this Friday.
no, I don't know. No.
No. Okay then. Oh, we'll do next week then, or another day next.
See.
Oh,
Let's see.
it's so difficult making arrangements,
Oh,
isn't
I
it?
know. I know. Yeah.
'Cause there's so much going on. I had a flu injection on Monday. I was
Yeah,
supposed to have it on Tuesday.
I had mine, and I thought she was gonna, jab me through to the bone. She was trying to get the
Oh,
injection in the bone.
there was a really nice physician, pharmacist in where I went, and he was so nice.
Oh,
He said, I'm going to press the muscle," he
Oh.
said. And he pressed the muscle, and, while he
oh.
sang
So
off,
she just jammed it in as hard as she could.
he didn't hurt, no.
Yeah, it was awful. But
Uh,
no, I didn't hurt afterwards. I was okay afterwards, so that was okay.
mm.
Yeah.
And I got my COVID on the 26th.
Oh, yes. Well, I guess that's what I was thinking. I had the COVID that hurt, but I haven't had the flu. The flu's coming up.
Flus usually don't hurt, but it did. I did give me a headache.
Oh, right. Okay.
Are you going to get a coffee? I'm going
Yes,
to
I'm
get
going
a
to go
coffee
right now.
now.
Right now.
I'm
Goodbye.
going to get a coffee now.
You know, what is it about these women, right? I tell them it's going to be bloody 10 minutes and they probably go off, flipping heck. Henry's
Go
a
on then.
closet woman.
Go on, get on with it.
I can't, I can't, the women ain't here.
Let's go.
Goff's got a place to go.
Shape up or ship out.
Ship in or ship out. That's what my mum used to say.
Very right. Let's go.
We'll give them 1 minute. Right, I'll call them. Right, put your ears in your eyes. Right, and no bloody, you're not a monkey, Richard. He's eating a bloody banana. And Pat, hurry up. We got to crack on. Some of us have got to go to bed tonight with sexy women. Oh, come on. Right. Right, we'll give them a countdown. 30 seconds. They're probably having a natter on the phone.
Anne's probably onto the Apple Store.
She tells us everything, right? She's locked out. She's blocked out. No wonder. Oh, there she is. Good. And we were just talking about you.
Locked out. Been locked out.
Yeah, I've been locked out my house. Yeah. Right, and we're starting. I'm not fucking waiting anymore. Right. Right. Right.
No, I'm here. Pat isn't here.
Yeah, we know. Gonna get started. I tell you what, by the time I've faffed about, right. Right, good. Do you remember that time that the other Anne was going to go to the to that shop in Cardiff and get me a new blow-up rubber doll?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I haven't seen her for years.
Tell you what, she was one of the most gullible women I've ever met in my life.
Well,
Well, long story is, boys, me and Anne convinced this other woman called Anne that my blow-up rubber doll had a puncture. And she had phoned one of the shops in Cardiff, one of the sex shops in Cardiff, and they were going to get me a replacement blow-up rubber doll. The problem is it was all a joke.
well, who's the naive one then? I don't know.
Well, I'm not naive. She's I don't know. Anyway, right, here we go. Crack on with it. While the material form of society at any moment of time is not that society, it is a means by which that society is transmitted into the future. So, in other words, what we're saying about that is, we're not necessarily people don't wake up one day and say, look, we're the Iron Age people, but what they produce and the evidence that they produce within that timeline, within that transmission, is what we see them being in the future. It's a bit like a Shakespeare play. William Shakespeare had no idea that people were still going to be performing his plays now, but and refer to them as Shakespearean plays. But it's all about what we see in the future and how things and how things manifest. Now, we're not going to get too much into what this means: insiders, outsiders, and strangers. But when you feel within the house, that sort of, you are within that house, and people coming from the outside and people outside that boundary are the strangers, or the world around is the strange world. We create these houses that we live in, and those houses that we live in, society itself is a kind of clock whose moving parts are individual human beings, and that's very, very true. And how we see that how we see the past as being as though active parts in the past, and in a way, everything about the past and how we see it is like a stage. We are thus actors on a stage that are seeing the past and trying to perform the past in the way that we interpret the past on how the Iron Age was, and we're not necessarily right and we're not necessarily wrong most of the time. And what one way of seeing the past, and one way the people saw the past, is to dwell in the White House of the world. And this is from a very famous poem that I used to know from one end to the next. In success, to share one's principles with the people. In failure, to live them out alone. These I call the qualities of a great man. And in part of that, a piece of poetry from Mencius, who wrote 300 years before the birth of Christ in China, it was to dwell in the White House of the world. Everything you see, everything, all those moments in the past are incredibly important to try and conceptualize and have a perception of this social environment. And that's what we talk about with Ingold as well. Now, this is a very, very interesting object. This is from that site in Cirencester, and it's quite a mundane but very interesting object. And the caption says it all there. When we try to understand the past, and we try to understand the workings of the past, we're only bystanders. We're only viewers about what that past is. And this is from that Baggerden site, which is north of Cirencester, that site that Gough was asking where that was. So we're comparing that site near Gloucestershire, in Gloucestershire, Cirencester, and we're comparing that site, Roman site, with linear walls and all the rest of it. That feeling of structures that are made of timber in the Roman world, and then we're comparing it with the stone structure that we see with the sites of Scatness and various other places. So the inability to determine a boundary between one layer and another is key to try to understand history and archaeology. Nothing in history and archaeology is as clear as Roman, early medieval, Anglo-Saxon, going into the Norman period, medieval. Nothing's like that. Everything sort of juxtaposes and overlaps with that idea of everything is in the moment and everything changes, and the past is also in the moment in many ways as well. This artifact, as it says, has been fired in a kiln which has heated one side more intense than the other. So the one side on the right has been fired more intense than the other side. This artifact is a metaphor for there being no beginning or end. This is the one thing with the past. You can never really know when something specifically began and when something specifically ended. It's a bit like a relationship, right? And that's a good metaphor. We can't know when we fell in love with somebody, and in a way we can't know if that relationship fell apart. When that relationship fell apart, we think, oh, is it still there? And the other person's saying, yes, it's still there, and you feel it isn't, right? There's always this sort of gray area between that as a metaphor in relationships, as there is in the past, right? So no matter which way we think people moved around buildings and how people reacted with buildings, it is our interpretation. It's always our interpretation of the past, and not necessarily a right interpretation. And again, to lay a path through the world is to dwell. To dwell is to live historically. Every historical form of life is a mode of production. Every moment, every time we think, in our lifetimes, in our own lifetimes, we are living in a computer age, which is now being a more robotic age, which we had a peaceful time in the 1980s, and things got very warlike in the 1990s. Those are historical modes of change in history, right? This something that never changes. So as we sort of move on and we sort of think about how there's a semblance or a conjecture of the past, and when we see how people moved around buildings, in what order or sequence they occur. And again, everything everything is within a concept or a system, right? And we'll mention this, and I'll mention in my own ways what this means. We do have available rationale thought, the concept of a system composed of discrete individuals. In other words, everyone reacts in a different way to a certain circumstance. You take me to a stone circle site, it's very unlikely that I will actually go past the boundary of the stones that are on the outside. I will usually stay on the outside of that stone circle site. But people immediately migrate to the inside of a stone circle site when there's no barrier for me going inside, but I choose not to. Right. And that is a system composed of our own discrete minds, our discrete individuality. People move in lines and need to understand lines in order to know where they can go. And that's very, very true. Everything, as Ingold would then say, that we can walk, we can weave, we can observe, we can sing, we can story tell, we can tell part of a story, right? And that's a movement. We can draw, we can write. All of these things have in common. The answer is that they all proceed along lines of one kind or another. The lines, the contextualization of lines, and how we move around this great world of ours in the past and as we move around it today. Maybe the past was a greater world and bigger world than the world is today. Right. Anne was just talking earlier on with Pat about, life is very complex. They got a lot to do. They got injections. They got meetings. They got families and all the rest of it. Is that as complicated as the past, or maybe our lives today are a lot more simple? There's that way of thinking and looking, and we've talking about that boundary again. With this vitrified piece of clay from Bagadan, which is saying it's a bit of slingshot. Might be, might not be. And when you think about slingshot, you think about warfare. Maybe it's just for downing a bird out of the sky. We don't know. So again, this is that sense of access analysis, and how the original building that we've seen, the Iron Age building at Scatness, used to look like. It looked like a wheel. And what you can clearly see is that this wheel itself, whether that exit was there leading off number 7, it's unlikely. Whether that was an early stage or later stage, but we'll leave that in for now. When we think about these buildings and how this building worked and how it developed and how it was, right? This building gets very complex, and there's lots of changes with this building, right? This is an early phase. This is quite a simple and an early phase to this structure, right? And the movement around this building is going to be very different than in later stages, right? And what we've got is this plan. This is what access analysis is. You enter a building, you go into a transitional zone, and as you're entering a building, going into a transitional zone, what you see with our building from the entrance, you've got number 10. Number 10 itself is where you would carry into a building, and then in the middle, you've got something known as the communal zone, the center of the building. It looks quite simple, but it's not, because there are different. From C1, you can go into different directions. You can go to where that exit is, where it's marked on there, if that was an earlier or later phase, but the exit is still there. You can actually go into all these different rooms, and you're thinking, well, why is even Karl mentioning this? Why is this so important? It's so important to try and understand that there is a relationship with these buildings and how people acted within them. Now, you could quite simply say, right, why don't we just have a round building and there's nothing else? We have the communal zone, and that's all we've got, right? We don't need anything else. And when we think about having a communal zone, you go from the outside into the building. There's no exit. There's nothing else. You go from the inside and the outside. That's it, right? You've got nothing like this. It's just a circular space, right? Now, that sense of a circular space you might associate with Native Americans, right? You might think of their teepees, You might think of Inuits, where they've got similar structures like teepees, which are basically circular structures. You go from the outside into the inside. You have a fire in the middle. That's it. There's nothing else. It's simplified. There's no stages to it at all. And you go in the corner, you lie down, and you've got the fire. And the next day, you lift that tent up and you go somewhere else. But the difference between that structure, the teepee, and this type of structure is this is a permanent structure. A teepee is not. So a teepee doesn't need to be as complicated. Within a structure like this, you need to know where everything is and how everything works in a structure like this. So again, this is basically areas of access. And as this develops, what you have is you have this, where you've got levels of access, levels of complication. So the reason for talking about this is to see how complex buildings are in the past. As we've already said, buildings can be very simple, but then buildings can be very complex. Why are buildings very complex? Why are there different zones in a building? And that then comes into control. You have different zones in a building because there's certain levels of control. We, as human beings, we're very controlling, right? We wish to control where we are in a building. When you've got a circular building and you've got a hearth in the middle and nothing else, right? That's the most simplistic society. When you think about an igloo, it's quite a simplistic thing. When you think about Inuits, with their structures as well, right? And you think about Mongolians with their yurts. These are quite simple structures, but these are not simple structures, except these are Iron Age structures, and teepees are still being used today, and they're quite simple structures. In a way to try and unravel the complexities of the past, aid us to understand the complexities of the present. Our lives are extremely complicated as human beings. They don't need to be as complicated, but they chose with this building in the Iron Age to have these complexities. And then you move on and you start to think, well, this is how you're entering a building. This is how it might be. But what you could do, you could go from the outside into the building, you could go around the fireplace, you could go into all these different zones, and you could go around the backs of these zones and wander all the way around the back. Now, this might think, well, that's just really obvious, but it's not really obvious. And the reason why is the following statement. If you go to a castle, you stand in the hall in the castle, and it says, there's the hall, there's the kitchen, and there's the staircase. And if you go back outside, you go over there and there's the tower, and there's another hall, and there's the solar, which is up there. That's where the accommodation would have been. Very few people actually go into these places and try to work out how people moved around. So, okay, if we can think about a castle, we're going through the hornwork, right? And then we think that we've got the moat, right? And if the drawbridge isn't down, you can't go any further. The drawbridge comes down. You go to the portcullis. The portcullis is still up. You can't get any further. Portcullis is lifted, and you keep going on. You go into the courtyard of the castle. When you're in the courtyard of the castle, where do you go next? And do you see how complex human societies are? Is to work out where you go next, or you just wait into the courtyard. You can't go anywhere else because you've got to wait for somebody. You go into the hall, you go into the kitchen, you go to see the other hall, and you see the lord of the manor. How do you react? So medieval society is extremely complex, right? And we develop our modern complexities in modern society from the way society develops. And then earlier on, it's no mistake of the imagination. We talked about Victorian sewage systems, and how Victorian sewage systems then changed how we operate in our modern lives today. That's another level of complexity. Except in for example, in the Neolithic, when you go to somewhere like Skara Brae, which is on Orkney, when you go to like Scarborough and Orkney, you've got a building that you've got sewage, you've got street systems, you've got a building that you go into, you've got a hearth, you've got dressers, you've got little niches that you go off, and you've got a toilet area, you've got a garderobe, really highly advanced in the Neolithic period. All these things develop. Now, one thing that would be fitting to work out, right? One thing that'd be fitting to work out is just to think that the original entrance into this building is actually over here. But then eventually the entranceway changes in a later phase to over here. Right, so that means that the functioning of the building completely changes and operates. And let's have a little look about how these changes come into play. So, and the other entranceway that used to be, which was over here, is now blocked up. But they've adapted this into also an entrance into another building. It can't be an entranceway because you can't get into that building now from the left-hand side. Right. So what we are in effect looking at, and how this all works, is that the entrance has actually changed over to this area, right? So the whole thing with access analysis has completely changed, has completely altered. And what you can see there, these things. So instead of having piers that you can walk around, it's like an individual area. It's like a porch area. Things are changed. Things are revolutionized into this area. You've got this entranceway, and then things get a lot more complicated. Let's look at how access analysis spans out. This is how things get very, very complex as you go into the Iron Age, as you function with this building. It's no longer going in from it's no longer going in from one entranceway. So what you're needing to do, you're trying to get you've got this communal area, and then you go into this area, and then you've got another communal area, and you're thinking, right, where do I go next? How does this work? How does this function? Am I going to be invited into building number 8? Or is somebody going to say, right, go and use the exit, get out of here, right? And the other thing as well is, with a building that is really complex like this, there's no windows. Where is the light coming from? Because the light can't come from over here, because it's a porch area, it's a communal area. And if there's any light coming from in here, it's only going one direction. It's not opening out into any other areas. So there's got to be another way of lighting this area, and you can't continually burn lamps. The other thing could be said is that maybe people lived, maybe people slept in these buildings, and they went into these buildings to get food, and they didn't do anything else with them. But if that's the case, why have they made them extremely complex? Do you see the point I'm trying to make? If this building is just a building to sleep, right, and to keep animals, you don't need it to be like this, right? But when they get the individuality, right, and they have these different zones, and it gets very, very complex. And then you've got this industrial building over here. Then you've got to ask yourselves those very key questions. What is this building all about? How are these buildings working? How are they seeing and operating in this Iron Age? And the other thing as well is, look how complex that is, right? If this was a building that was dark, continually dark, and there was no fire lit, how would you be able to find your way over to this over here, right? Okay, you can't really go where the C1 is in the middle, and you can't go where the C1 is in the middle, because that's where the fireplace is, right? So this is a very, very dangerous building, right, if it's all dark, right? And you could think that they could have lamps with oil lamps with burning blubber of whales, or you've got tallow, and you've got those types of candles, which we know that they would have had, right? But that uses a lot of resources. That's going to use a lot of bloody sheep needing to be killed to produce your candles. You need those sheep to produce milk. You need those sheep to produce wool. You need those sheep to eventually give you lambs, and then you can eat the meat, right? So again, looking at something like this, looking at the complexities and how this works is key to understand the past. So it's not just looking at a building and thinking, there's the building. It's looking and trying to understand how a building like this worked, right? So then what we've got, then as we're sort of seeing, you've got these levels of access, right? So let me just compare this with a modern house, right? I haven't got an image on there, but this is when architects actually use this system to design houses, right? Amazingly enough, you'll be quite surprised, but architects use access analysis, right? So with a, say for example, let's look at a very, very simple house, right? So you go in through the front door, right? And there's a corridor. And on the right is a room, right? And the room doesn't go anywhere, right? In front of you is a stairway, right? But just before you get to the stairway, there's another room on the right. And that leads you to a kitchen. And then the kitchen leads you to another door outside. So these are quite simple systems. You go up the stairs, and you get to the landing, which is the communal zone, and the communal zone itself leads you to a bathroom and a toilet. And this is a one-bedroomed house, and you go to the bedroom there. It's a big bedroom. It's simple. Architects design their houses on those principles. That's quite a simple system, right? But this isn't. This Iron Age structure is extremely complex, right? And are Roman buildings extremely complex? That's the question. So when we think about levels of access into a building like this with like a lean-to on, basically an industrial lean-to, right? Because that's what the building on the left is. It's an industrial lean-to. It's where they're doing all their industrial stuff. They've decided they're going to need it. And the other thing as well is this system of buildings together, this works for about 150 years, right? But the circular building's there for over 300, 400 years, right? And it's completely working for the people. It's acting for the people. It's working. Now, one little thing that I didn't mention on Tuesday, right, was that and this is a bit of a red herring, but it might not be a red herring. Where you've got the pillar there, and you've got between two cells 8 and you've got two cells 9, right? That is extremely worn on the inside, right? So it's worn by there, and it's almost as if it's been worn away, right? And there's more wear on that pillar than on any other pillar in the structure, right? Why is it so worn? What makes it a worn pillar, right? So in other words, Goff could be thinking, oh my, Karl, why didn't they just go from C1 into 5 cell, and there's the fire there, go around the fire, right? And I go to 10 and they're into the industrial building. But the evidence between 8 and 9 tells us that there's a lot of wear there. They went that way to go to where 10 is and then 11 into that building. Why? Why are they doing that when things could be so simple? They could just walk in, but they're not doing that, right? So this is why we're doing access analysis, to try and understand what's going on. This is, again, a simplified plan, but but as you know, it can be a lot more complex, because that there, when you look at the complexities about how all these link together, how you can go from cell 8 to 9, and you can go from the communal zone, and how all these things work, right? And when we look at the Roman plan, and what we did last night, we got to the Roman plan, and I just basically said, right, we'll do the Roman plan. I'll show you that, and then what we'll do next week, we'll lead from the Roman stuff, and then we'll look at loads of really nice images, not access analysis, loads of nice images from Scatness, and then we'll be doing something else as well next week as well. So next week could be very complex for me to put together, but I will give it a go. So again, looking at that, and we're thinking about these blocks, right? Again, look at the way that works. And it's all dry stone. This is a Brocca Musa. I took that photograph. It's great. And one thing that we would say, hang on, I just got to double check how far this Roman stuff is away. Oh God, it's a lot further than I thought. Right. Okay. We'll probably finish a little bit before the Roman stuff, sadly. But what we've got, because I know Pat needs to get to bed soon. Right. But what I'm going to say is that this is the site at Giles Hoff, and at Giles Hoff they got big chunk of the Brock there, which is a 2+, 2.5, 3 meters tall in places. And on the right you've got the buildings. Right, you've got the actually at Giles Hoff is actually much better preserved than Scatness, but at Scatness we can sort of see a little bit more of the plan in a different way. Right, so the Brock on the right, and you can actually see a narrow street there, and you're starting to think, well, you can see the shadow of the Brock. It's a very with the buildings full height, it's going to be very dark in that sort of in that alleyway. And I remember sitting in here today, right, and we've had power problems with our solar panels today. We've generated 1% power today compared to 50% power that we'd usually generate. It's been so dark and dull, right? And this is a building in the middle of nowhere, right? These buildings are all tight together. It'd be very dark places, right? But there's probably a reason for that we're not really understanding at this stage. And this was a bit of a comparison when we think of. I'll just go on for a couple of minutes longer, then we'll finish. These are the long handled combs, the bone evidence that you found at Scatness, and you've got the bone evidence that we showed you earlier on from the Roman site of Bagaden, which is near Cirencester. And I got some beautiful images to show you next week as well. Some bits of stone with lines on and stuff, which I'd all lined up the images. I'll be deleting all the images tomorrow, simply because I want to take better images to show you next week, because I wasn't happy with the images that I got. And again, that's like the little exit into the main building, the circular building. It probably looked a bit like this, right? Quite narrow, and going into the center. And the other thing as well is, you have to say that you're going from buildings which have got alleyways like this, which are dark, into a doorway, and unless there's lighting within, right, it's going to be very dark in. So you're going from a dark world into a dark world, unless you're going from a dark world into a well lit world that we need to really understand a bit more. And steelite ring fragments, lots of steelite found at the site at Scatness again. Steelite is like a really soft stone that was massively used in the Viking period, but obviously this is the Iron Age. Steelite rings, and this is another image of building 8. You can actually see it's quite big, so it wouldn't have had a stone roof. It's just too wide to have a stone roof. This is building 8, remember. And building 8 itself, that's showing some of the evidence of where some of the furnaces and kilns were, some of the cooking areas, right? Again, this was a huge fire risk, and so what was on their roof? They must have had a roof, because if it rained, everything would go out. So what's going on? Something that we're not really understanding. And the other week we mentioned about temporary roofs that could be moved, portable roofs. Again, that's something that I've got something in my head saying something like that. Some kind of weird industrial process in the medieval period that they could move a bit of the roof in, and then and move it back out again. Anyway, something like that. Whalebone vessel. Vessels made of whalebone. Loads of pottery evidence found at the site, but they're using whalebones. Whalebone vessels. Again, this is another thing. We've got evidence, for example, from Linessa Brodka, that we've got whalebone vessels that are actually used for store. You'd have oil in them. They were oil lamps. And again, that's what one of the whalebone vessel looked like. Again, other evidence that you don't find elsewhere. And again, put loads of pottery evidence. Shown you this image before, a really nice one. This is a pot that's conical shaped, that's shown flat, but this is more or less complete. This was found in building 8, the industrial building, right? So much evidence found in there. And again, I'm probably rushing this now, but I think I'll call it a day now, but I will start next week with this image and that image. But I could say I got to the Roman stuff. There's a Roman structure, right? And you could see there that the Roman structure is a little bit more complex than meets the eye, right? Because if you go to D, you can go to C, you can go to B, you can go back out to E, you can go to A. When you're in A, you can go to B and H. So again, we'll explain all this next week and how sort of this syntax and access analysis this works. Is the Roman world more complicated or less complicated than the Iron world? We will see next week, and that's where we'll go next week. So it's 9:35, and I cannot go any further because I cannot afford Pat to moan and say, bloody hell, we do it with this has gone right up to 10 o'clock now. You promised this would be a shorter class, and it is, Pat, just for you.
Good. Thank you.
Anything for you, Pat. I would do anything for love, but I won't say I love Goff. He's a great mate. Right, talking about mates, Goff, anything you'd like to say?
No questions. I'll look forward to next week, and I might have a few questions then. Thank you.
Good. Next week's gonna, as I say, is going to be extremely complex because I'm going to try and do 3 lectures in one somehow. Right. Oh, and if you come on earlier on, I'm sure Anne's got something to tell us next week. Right. Anything from you, Anne?
Well, it's going to be easier to understand probably when we see the Roman way of operating, how a Roman house operates, you know, in comparison. Because I kept thinking of our field, you know, we've got a field nearby that used to be just a field that was for a playing field.
Yes.
And, you know, only people went to play football on it, you know, people walked their dogs around the perimeter.
Yeah.
But they've grown islands of
Yes.
They
And yeah, that's exactly the
divided
same.
it up, and they've made and it's fascinating
Yes.
to see
Yes.
how people behave and how
Yes.
they've made pathways, you know, and that's what it just reminded me. And
Yes.
you can almost see what sort of person they are. Are they a person with a dog, or is there a person on their own running? Not many people go on their own, but
No.
you could do a study of that actually. Not about
And that is human nature, and that is a
yeah,
metaphor for these buildings, exactly how people work with these things. The thing is, right, this is the point. You can have an open field with nothing in it, or you can do something with it, and you've just dedicated that human beings have got to do things with something. They've got to have entrances and exits, and they've got to have boundaries.
It's
And
all
the best example of that, Anne, is a frigging maze.
yeah. It's like a maze, only
Exactly.
it's interesting, but I can see how you've got work going on in these places, you know, and
Yes.
they probably don't do anything more interesting than walk up and down, back and forward, you know. But anyway, we'll see next week
See
what
you
you've
next week.
got to
Exactly.
offer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Anyway, that was really good, Anne, that bit. Anything from you, Richard? You got to say something else other than an absolutely brilliant class, and I'm great. Go on.
Oh, nothing from me.
Well, it's very intellectual.
Yeah. I'm going to leave
Oh,
you to it. I've got to
Okay,
make a move.
bye.
oh, you got to go, have you,
Bye.
Richard? Richard, we'll see you next week, Richard. No, no.
Okie
Thanks for
doke,
joining
bye.
us. No, no,
Bye.
no, no. Right, Pat. Anything from you?
Well, I have a new 2 words: access analysis. I'm going to
See?
throw that word around.
And actually, it's an architectural and archaeological word. So you chuck that at your husband, right? Say that
Yeah.
how does this house function? Where's the access? Where's the movement? Where's the stages of entry? Where's the syntax analysis?
I just want the word. I like the word.
Exactly, the syntax, exactly. Right, okay. I'll remember to say hello to your friends in California when I'm there,
Ooh,
Pat, even though you're not from California. Anyway, you'll have to meet Kate one day. Anne, when we do our St. Barracks thing next year, we've got to get Pat along. Right, okay
Yeah.
then. She's a damn old Yank, but she's a very firm Donald Trump supporter. So there you go.
oh no.
On that note, Henry.
I think one question would be, take into account that building was there for 300-400 years.
Yeah.
How you actually deal with the evolving and changing its uses.
So are you dealing with the changing and evolving uses? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, actually, do you know what? Right. In every other lecture, right, this is what I would say. In yesterday and today, I've not said that or analysed that once. And you are very right. Obviously, when you think about it, right, then you've taken this access analysis further, right? So if you think about these buildings and let's just make it easier. You've got building 12 and building 8. Forget that there was no building 8. We'll just make this easy. So we got those two buildings and they've been together and they're together for like 150, 200 years, right? We do actually have archaeological evidence to say that within building 12, the bigger building, there was other cooking areas, which then they decide to cap off, and they didn't use those cooking areas. We've got maybe they kept animals, lambs in there at certain times of year. Maybe they did different crafting things at different times of the year. The one thing that I've not really gone is the fact that different times of year the building had different purposes and different uses. Right. And I think that's rather than over a long period of time, Henry, different purposes over the year. Right. And I think that's very powerful. So obviously in the winter months, you've got less light. So what are you exactly doing? Right. You're doing things in the winter that you haven't got time to do in the summer. So obviously those evolving things and purposes. And that's a very, very important point.
Yeah.
So anything else, Henry?
No, the roof one was just interesting. I just thought whether that would be portable skin roof with quite light beams put across that you would then pull out and move around.
That would make a lot of sense, but there's 2 points with this. With high winds in Shetland, they wouldn't have been the high winds in the past that we get today, which are higher. But with all the other buildings around, it's going to have a lot more shelter. So having something that's a little bit more portable like that would be okay to stick on the roofs and to move them around because they've got a lot more shelter. Today it wouldn't work, but in the past it would have. Yes, good point.
That was it. Thank you.
Right, that is a really good end. That's probably one of the best ends we've had ever. So if nobody else has got anything else to say, I've really enjoyed that. We're going to do more next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, and this has been a lot. So nothing else, then I'm going to say goodnight to Anne, Goff, Pat, Henry, everybody else online, and look forward to seeing you next week. Keep safe and don't do anything I wouldn't do, which is everything.
Good night.
Take care. Night.
Good night.
Right. Good night.
Night, folks. Night.
Yeah.
Night. Have a good night.
Save lots of money for your electricity. Right. Bye then.
Yeah, thanks. Saving loads.
There we go.
Night. I'll go on. If
Anne?
you two want to chat, go on. I know you two want to chat. Go on, say something. Go on.
Anne,
Yeah.
would
Hi.
you like to go for lunch a week Friday?
A week Friday.
Yeah.
Good idea.
And I remembered the place I wanted to take you to. It's in
Oh.
North Call. Used to be called Sidoli's. And I was there recently and I didn't go in because it was called Gusto's or something. So I thought we could check it out and have lunch there.
Oh, all right.
It's
No,
right
no,
off
so-
it's
wouldn't
off the beach ways, it's near the Welsh gift shop. It's right near there on the corner.
Oh,
Pat, shouldn't you phone up?
yeah.
Shouldn't you phone up and see if they're open first?
It had
No,
all
I know, I'm
the signs.
serious.
The door was open. It It was open. It
Yeah, I'm in the middle of finding out whether I'm free. I'll probably be free next Friday.
yeah.
Did you say, does it have to be Friday?
Well,
Well, we usually choose Friday, don't we? All right, then. We'll say
Good
yes,
idea.
and
Yeah.
then we'll.
I'll check to make sure Gustos is operating. I couldn't
Yeah.
believe
Yes.
I went up
Yeah,
there that
I
all
did
the
go
signs
to-
were changed. It
I
went from
did go to
Sedoli.
Hall, and we were going to go for a cup of coffee in our favourite little place,
Yeah,
and it was shut
yeah, I know.
on a Wednesday afternoon.
Oh, Wednesday. Yeah.
So
I'll
it's
phone
shut
ahead
at
of time.
3.
I'll check it out.
Shut at 3.
Yeah.
There's always the other thing. You could meet up with Dell. I'm sure he'd go along.
No, I'm gonna
Yeah,
pick her up
no.
and drive her there. I'm gonna
It's
drive
Oh,
you there.
Adele, Adele doesn't really. He doesn't really. He's busy most of the time. He's busy
Okay.
because he's got a
Anyhow.
very big social life, I think. Anyway,
Well, anyhow, I thought I'd pick you up because you were so nice taking care of me after my cataracts.
oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, good.
I'll let you know what's
Okay,
happening
if
next
you're
week.
available.
Okay.
Right.
And
Okay.
Chris,
So,
yeah. Okay then.
okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
Carl.
Oh, you can always
No,
come
no.
if you like.
Well, hey, one thing I would say, right? Don't when with the new Downton Abbey film coming out, right? Um, um, if you are going to go and see it, let me go and see it first, so I can tell you where I am in the film.
Woohoo! Woohoo!
So I
Go
don't
watch
want
it.
you to I don't want you to go and see the film, right? And then you decide that in the bit where there's like a farming scene, you think, oh, I just gonna go to the loo, right? And Anne goes, oh, there was Carl, I saw him then. He said, oh, bother, I
Oh,
missed it.
hey, we could do that, Pat. We could go to the cinema one time.
Yeah, I want to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you got
We'll have to
Downton
have
Abbey.
a
I'm not sure
social
when it's out.
diary for the autumn, for the
Gotta
winter.
find a movie though. That's the hard bit, is find a movie. I don't want to see the latest monster movie.
Oh,
No,
Scary,
I'm not in any of them. Don't worry about it.
story,
no.
scary
Oh, no,
murder
it's got to
one.
be a nice one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Gotta go. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey,
Bye-bye
folks.
then.
No, no,
Bye.
no, no,
Bye.
no, 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 Pat, no, no. Oh, that was great. It was very complex at the beginning. I don't know where everybody is tonight. You know, I don't know. Where's happened to all the discussion? It just suddenly went. Where did all the discussion go? One minute we had loads of discussion, and the next minute everybody's gone. Bloody hell! Right, okay. I'm just going to double check something on you, and oh, okay. We don't want that going. Do you know what? I've decided that I'm going to be looking a lot more on OCD actually. And isn't this a good little bit of light? I think it's good, but unfortunately, it makes it look really grainy online. I don't know. So there we go. Legendary. Just gonna double check this. There we go. But unfortunately, it makes it look really grainy online. I don't know. So there we go. Legendary. Just gonna double check this. There we go. But unfortunately, it makes it look. That's a bit odd. Anyway, I'm going to say good night now. Just going to look in the chat box. There's usually not much in the chat box, but it's 9:48. And I don't know what the hell that was. Right, chat box. Chat box. Everyone, chat box, chat box, chat box, chat box, chat box. I've got a weird icon on my screen now. Nothing in the chat box. 1, 2, nothing there. 3, nothing on that page. 4, 5, 6, 7, no. Okay, diolch yn fawr i chi if anyone's watching, and thank you very much for watching. Diolch yn fawr. Cheers. Bye.